Yeah, thanks, Scott. Awesome. Great intro. Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Bridge from Money Coaches Canada, advice only certified financial planner. I'm going to do the boring money stuff first so that we can end with the fun lifestyle stuff with Scott later on. We've got, as Scott mentioned, the chat box open if you want to ask any questions as we go through, and we will email you those links to resources later on. So let me just see if the technology is with us. If you can see my screen, can you give me a thumbs up in the chat, please? And Scott, I'll rely on you to monitor that and any new attendees as well, my friend.
Absolutely. And I can see it just fine. So it looks like you're good to go on both my screens here, sir.
Okay, great. Awesome.
By the way, the audience is doing a great job. Pam's giving us a thumbs up. Rhonda, IJ even spelt out the word great for us. So you're good to go.
Excellent. Okay, so here we go. Why prepare at all for retirement? Like, why are we even having this webinar? Like, if you like your job, why not just keep working? The challenge is that sometimes that choice is taken away from us. And should this happen and we're not prepared either financially or lifestyle wise, then it can put us in a bit of a tricky spot. And 48% of people have to stop working earlier than they thought they would. That choice is taken away from them. The three main reasons are company downsizing, health reasons, or taking care of a loved one. So no one has to stop working. There's nowhere that says if you like your job, just continue. But if you're not prepared and you do have to stop earlier than planned, or you just decide, I've changed my mind, I want to stop working, you do want to be prepared on both the financial side and the lifestyle side that Scott's going to talk about in a bit. So just to get an idea of where everybody is when it comes to the choice to slow down work, how close are you in years to your target retirement age? If you're already retired, please go ahead, brag away. Let us know in the chat, and Scott can read those out.
Yeah. So in the chat box now, we've got Jennifer 1 year away, Larissa 2 years and counting. Larissa, I hope that's counting down and not up. Anybody else? Lloyd saying, and I think for some of us, yeah, Lloyd, far too many is what we're going. Cyrus,
like Lloyd.
6 months to go. Natalie at 5 years. Mike Martosh is already 3 years in. So Mike, we're going to try to ignore you because you're already doing what we want you to do. Nice. Pam, 8 work optional years. Thumbs up to you.
Excellent.
IJ, enjoying my retirement my way. And I think IJ, by the way, has got a great thing going for there. So there's who's on the call so far.
Excellent. Excellent. And I'm glad one of those folks mentioned work optional, because that's a term that you actually introduced me, Scott, and that I love, your work optional years, or financial independence years. So the point where you're not reliant on your salaried income to have the life that you want. And for me, it means getting up every morning and doing exactly what you want, kind of thing.
That's
so
great. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of use retirement because it's a quicker word, but I prefer those other words, work optional and financial independence. So anyway, good. Thanks for that, folks. So there's a lot that goes into retirement planning from the financial side. And what I'm going to talk about today is by no means an exhaustive list, but if you can do these 3 things, then you're going to be well on your way. So here we go. The first thing that I do with my clients, and that I suggest you do, is to understand what your target retirement spending is. So the reason for this is that if you don't know how much you want to spend in retirement, how do you know how much, if you've got enough saved or if you're on the right path? It's like training for a running race and you don't know what the length of the race is. You're not prepared properly. So one of the first things that I do is figure out what that current spending is. Now, there's a rule of thumb out there that you may hear from your investment advisor or other people that says, just use the 70% rule. And that says that you will spend 70% of your pre-retirement income once you've stopped working. This is a rule of thumb that I don't love. So, for example, if you're making $100,000 before retirement, that you would spend $70,000. There you go, nice and simple. It's a real shortcut. I don't love it. When I work with my clients, I find people who are spending anywhere from 30 or 40% of their pre-retirement income up to 125%. Everyone's finances are different. So this is an important number. So how do you come up with this very important number? So what I recommend is looking at what you're spending now and what's going to be different in retirement. You can look at things like fixed monthly expenses, that's gym memberships, mortgage, insurance payments, cell phones, internet, these kind of things, and then move on to the second category of variable monthly expenses. So things like groceries, gas, eating out, pet food, etc. And finally, annual expenses like property taxes, memberships, random things like clothes, gifts, travel, etc. Once you've determined what your current spending is, you can then review and see, all right, what's going to be different once I've stopped working? Will all of these expenditures still be around? Will my mortgage be paid off? Will the kids have launched? Do you plan to travel more? Will you be supporting the kids? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to ask you I know we have people here who are just getting ready for retirement. We have some who've enjoyed retirement. I've heard that spending can change depending, if you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Does it stay, in your experience, linear, or is there sort of a whatever kind of wave motion throughout that?
Yeah, so we often talk about the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. And the go-go years are your early years of retirement. You're young, you're healthy, you've got money, you spend a bit more, probably on travel and those fun adventure things. And then at some point, I don't want to put an exact age on it, it could be 75-ish, you start to slow down and you're spending less on those kind of things. And towards the end of your life, there might be increased costs for assisted living or increased healthcare costs, things like that. So it's a bit of a smile formation is how we talk about it, a bit of a U or a smile formation. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And can I ask you, when does the smile end? In other words, what year are you putting? Are we 130 years? Or are we 100 years? What do you suggest, just from a planning perspective?
Right. So if people knew when they were going to pass away, this whole exercise would be a lot easier, but of course, none of us do. I use age 95 when I'm doing my projections with clients. And that's because if both people in a couple are alive at age 65, there's a 25% chance at least one of them will be alive at age 95. So super conservative people might project to 100, and others might have health or genetic concerns or issues that say, no, I think 90 is going to be good enough for my purposes. But yeah, good question.
Thanks.
So another reason this exercise is important is one example. I had a client who came to me, and before we started working together, he said, yeah, Steve, I'm going to need $200,000 per year in retirement after tax. And we went through this exercise that I've just described to you, and it ended up that his actual target was $106,000. This had real implications because it meant he had to save a lot less than he thought he was going to have to. So anyway, one place that is common to slip up when figuring out this number is home expenses, repairs, renovations, upgrades, etc. I use 1% of your home's value as an annual average on what you might spend on home repairs, maintenance, upgrades, etc. This might sound high. Like if you've got $1 million house, that's $10,000 a year. Doesn't mean you'll spend it every year, but every 3, 4, 5 years, there might be a big project or a big repair, and you want to budget for it properly and be prepared for that. If you're in a strata property, you could use 0.5% because you've got condo or strata fees that help cover that. So, and maybe
one other question, if I can.
Yeah, there's a 5-question max, but go ahead.
Steve and I rehearsed this, and we just have different questions each time because I'm learning so much more. In your experience, when people, do they downsize their houses, as they get older, so that amount might change as well? Is it in their 60s or 70s, or what are you seeing with your practice?
Yeah, so this is the thing. Some people want to spend the rest of their lives in their house. They never want to go to an apartment if they're out in the countryside or whatever. And that's totally fine. But for many people, a house can be a significant asset when it comes to their retirement lifestyle spending. And taking equity out of that house, either by a financial downsize, not necessarily space downsize, but a financial downsize, and or something like a reverse mortgage, which I don't love, but if you've got no heirs and you don't want to leave your house, then that is another option. So there are choices available if you do own a home when you're at retirement. Does it? And in some places, I've got clients where it's a necessity that this is going to have to be part of their retirement plan, and they're totally fine with that because they weren't able to save, for example, maybe a little bit earlier. So yeah, thanks. No hard and fast rule though, for sure. So maybe as you go through this exercise, you come up with a couple of numbers, one that's more a pared down number, let's call it necessary spending, and another one that's more aspirational, maybe call it dream or wish spending. So, and I have a spreadsheet that I'll share with you that might help with this very important exercise. Okay, the second thing, after you've got a pretty good idea what you'd like to spend in retirement, the second thing is counting all of your retirement income sources. So for some people, that's very easy. It's maybe a defined benefit pension plan, Canada Pension Plan or CPP, old age security or OAS. Other people might have an RSP, they might have a defined contribution pension plan, a locked-in retirement account, a TFSA, non-registered investments, rental income, inheritance money, et cetera, et cetera. So have a quick think about it. And in the chat, let us know how many sources of retirement income you think you might have. And if you're a couple, you can add them as a couple, doesn't matter. And Scott can tell me what's coming up there.
Yeah. So the questions are, how many sources of retirement income?
Yeah. How many sources?
And we'll qualify that and say legal sources. Okay. Because we don't want to go into the gray area.
Yeah.
Natalie has a tenant. Larissa says 4 and counting. Ha ha ha. Your humor found a mark there, Steve. Okay. Okay. Yep, I'm seeing 3 in a private message as well. So how many? And some of them must have so much coming into their kind of like Jennifer 5. Arlene has 2 that are going on. That's fantastic. Those are the numbers that we're seeing in there between 2 and 5 so far.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Scott. So once you know how many income sources you have, what they are, the next step is to calculate what the estimated total of these might be. Some are easier than others. So Canada Pension Plan and old age security are relatively easy to figure out. So just a brief CPP 101, while we are salaried employees, both ourselves and our employers are putting in an equal amount each month towards Canada Pension Plan, up to an annual limit. This money gets invested by the CPP investment board. And once we hit 60 or as late as 70, we can start to take a monthly pension from the money that us, ourselves and our employers have put into that. So the maximum rate now at age 65 is just over $1,300 or about $16,000 per year. And the average Canadian, just as an FYI, gets about half of that on a monthly basis for a very, very wide variety of reasons. A side note, but a very important one, is that if you choose to take your Canada Pension Plan at age 60, you'll receive 36% less than you would have if you had waited until 65. And if you wait until age 70, you'll actually receive 42% more than you would have at age 65 the rest of your life. So it's a very, very big difference. Old age security is based on how long you've lived in Canada. It can be started as young as age 65 and taken as late as age 70. Again, you get more for waiting a little bit longer. The maximum old age security right now is $688 per month, or about $8,000 per year.
Steve, so the difference between 60 and 70 for CPP is 78%?
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot. That's good math, but it's a lot, and it makes a big difference. And honestly, we could do a whole presentation just on Canada Pension Plan and the timing of when to take CPP, et cetera. Now, as far as where to find what you might get from Canada Pension Plan, you can go into your My Service Canada account. And that has your CPP statement of benefits. So how much you've put in each year. It's good to check to make sure no years have been missed. And you can also see your benefit estimate, how much they project that you will get at age 65. We'll provide you a link for this in the resources if you don't have a My Service Canada account. So moving on to other income sources, a defined benefit pension plan pays you a certain amount per month the rest of your life. It's fantastic, the gold standard in pensions. A defined contribution plan will pay you based on how your investments have performed. So the risk is more with the employee. Same goes for group or personal RSPs, TFSAs, non-registered investments, locked-in retirement accounts, or LIRAs. For these, I use around a 5% rate of return, depending on how they're invested for a balanced portfolio. And there are online calculators to help you figure these out, what they might provide you. And I'll be providing you one as well to our attendees today. So the big question is, you've got all these, you know what you want to spend, you know what your income sources are and what they should pay you. The big question is, are these enough? to give you the retirement that you want at the target, at the age that you want to retire? Or is there a gap? If there's a gap, it's not the end of the world. There's many options available. You can work a little bit longer, you can save a little bit more, you can do some part-time work in retirement, or you could retire your target retirement spending, or save harder for the next few years. On the flip side, maybe add them up and you discover, hey, I've got more than I need, and you could slow down your savings rate, or stop working a little bit earlier, or go to part-time work a little bit earlier, or increase spending in retirement. So
Steve, you have time for a quick question that just came through?
Absolutely.
Some folks have mentioned before that they're going to work for a while because they're worried about having enough. When is it too late to start saving, if it ever is? Just what are your thoughts on that?
Never too late to start saving. These years in the lead up to our work optional living years are often the best time, because we're probably at our highest earning years. The kids are maybe a little bit older, maybe launched, maybe mortgages paid off. Either way, this is a really good opportunity to do some hard savings. And if you saved, say, $1,000 a month for the next 5 years, and you got 5% rate of return, you'd have around $70,000 to put towards your retirement. And if that's a 10-year window, now we're talking $160,000, not including the tax refund you would get if you used an RSP account. So, yep.
Okay. So what I heard from you there is it's never too late to save as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. Absolutely. And there's always choice. You always have choice. So we talked about retirement spending, what your target is, knowing your source of retirement income. The third factor that I'm going to talk about today is knowing how much to take from each account per year. So you've got all these different accounts. How do you take it out? And your key is probably, your goal is probably to minimize tax, to maximize your spending while you're in retirement. And this is each of the accounts we have has its own tax consequences, and how much we take each year will determine how much tax we pay. This will get a tiny bit technical. Please stick around after. We're going to have a Q&A after my section and after Scott's section as well, and then after 11 if anyone wants to stick around. But anyway, these ones are taxable as income, just like your salary. Defined benefit pension plans, defined contribution pension plans, RSP. RIFs. RIF stands for Registered Retirement Income Fund. That's what a RSP becomes when it grows up and you start to take money out of it. Lifetime income funds, which is from a locked-in retirement account, Canada Pension Plan, and Old Age Security are all taxable as income. Less tax is payable on non-registered accounts, depending on what it's invested in. So a non-registered account is not an RSP, it's not a TFSA, it's its own thing. And if you've got, say, equities, stocks, shares, whatever that pay Canadian, or funds that pay Canadian dividends, they're taxed more favorably. Capital gains, that's a gain in the value, is also taxed more favorably. But interest income on something like cash and GICs is taxed as income. No tax, the best one of all, tax-free savings accounts, which is why this is a great tax to account to invest in. Guaranteed income supplement, GIS, which is for lower income Canadians making less than about $20,000 per year. And also the sale of your home in Canada, your principal residence anyway, is tax-free. Not so for recreational properties. So getting the mixture of how much to take from each of these accounts is a bit like making a magic potion. You take a dash from your RSP or RIF, a pinch of non-registered money, add in a pound of pension income splitting, some pension income, and voila, poof, you've got a nice balance. You want to smooth this out over your lifetime optimally. At age 65, RIF and LIF income is eligible for splitting with your partner. Spousal RSPs can help as well. So taking everything, like the short-term plan might be, well, Steve, I'll just take out everything from my TFSA this year. And that's great for this year. You pay no tax, like, wow, this is fantastic. But you're just kicking that tax can down the road a little bit and probably paying more tax in the long run. That's why I always recommend that people take at least up to the bottom couple of tax brackets, taking out at least $54,000 per year as income in any 1 year, because it's the lowest tax you're ever going to pay. So there we go. So there's the goal to smooth out your tax liability from the time you stop working through to the medium and long term. So let's see here. Oh, yeah, that's never too late, Scott. You asked that great question earlier about saving. Never too late to start saving. So, and again, these are good years to do that.
Steve, there was just a question on that last one while you had there, just before you summarize. It was from Mary, and I just thought it was really great with the last sign you had up there. I think, Mary, and you can correct me if I'm not understanding, but if you put that away 70,000 in your 30s, you'd be generating that much year in compound interest. And I think she's just saying that, the best asset is time, right, for compound interest on that. So, but you're saying that it's never too late to do that. So
that's correct.
Yeah.
The earlier you start, the better. The old expression, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Yes. And so we may be just licking our wounds, Mary. I'm not sure if you are, but I know I'm licking several wounds because I did not start early enough.
Oh, speaking of late in timelines, the RSP contribution deadline is about 2 weeks, just about from today, actually. So to get a contribution to count towards your 2022 taxable income, the deadline is today, and you can do that up to anytime up to March 1st. Give it a couple of days beforehand, I would recommend. So,
and can we just ask for those who may not know questions is questions would be, how much do we know we can contribute? What's the tax benefit? And should I borrow if I need to borrow to make that contribution?
Those are all really good questions, and I don't want to eat into your time, Scott. I'm very
you go ahead. This is
so how you know how much you can contribute is on your notice of assessment, which was on your which you would have received after you filed your taxes last year. You can also see that in your My CRA account and go into you can click around there. You'll see it there. That was the first question. The second question was, should you borrow to make an RSP contribution? I would say yes, if you have a plan to pay it back quite quickly. Yes, if you're in a higher tax bracket, like 40, 44, 47, 53, even better, and you can borrow the money at, say, 5, 6, 7% for this short time. You borrow the money from yourself for a short time period, a couple months, and then you pay it back. And then you're paying very little interest, but you've got the RSP deduction. Was there another one in there, Scott?
I think you caught him. You just took a whole hour and put it into 30 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, good. So in summary, folks, the three things that I think are very important considerations when it comes to preparing for a confident retirement on the financial side are: clarify your current expenses, determine what will be the same, what will be different in your work optional years. Number 2, determine your retirement income sources and how much each of them are going to pay you. And finally, understanding how much to take annually from each account to minimize tax. So that is that's what I got for you in the time allotted. So we got a couple minutes for questions, Scott. Or do you want to...
Yeah. So if you have a question for Steve, and if it's of a detailed nature, he may start answering that now, and you can connect with him afterwards. If it's a general one, then by all means, put it in the question box. So anything about retirement spending, retirement earning, that type of thing.
It's all money stuff, Scott. Everyone's probably snoozing.
Yeah. Well, we're snoozing until we actually have to pay attention to it. And I think that's one of the things, isn't it, Steve? Like, how do you get somebody in their 30s and 40s interested in this stuff when they're, there's other things prioritizing in life, and yet it's the most valuable time for them to invest?
The biggest challenge to get any of us to do this is imagining our future selves. That is such a far off person when you're in your 30s and 40s that you can't even really relate to yourself in your 50s or 60s or 70s. So it is that is an exercise that I do with people who are a bit younger, is to imagine your future self and put all the decisions that you're making now in context of how does this impact them.
Fair enough. We have a couple of questions rolling in, and Jennifer, you sent this to everyone, so I'm quite sure you're not the only one who wants the answer. When is the best time to move your RSPs into RIFs? And for those just who don't know what a RIF is versus an RSP, just maybe you could just sort of highlight what the acronym is.
Yeah, brilliant question. So RIFs, RSPs become a RIF. It's mandatory they become a RIF at age 71. The money has to start coming out at age 72. But often I'm recommending people take it out much earlier from the RIF. So converting to a RIF much earlier. I've worked with clients that as early as age 58 kind of thing, when you've got no income, low income, whatever, you can get that money out at a low tax bracket. So how much other income do you have is one consideration. Do you need the money is another consideration. What's your tax picture look like, basically, is the so and Scott, to just go in, RIFs are different from RSPs because you can't put money into a RIF. You can only take money out. And once you convert to a RIF, there are mandatory withdrawals that are based on age. And the minimum at age 60 is probably around 5% or so. Lloyd Brager, the accountant, might pipe in because I bet you he knows the exact one. So anyway, the exact number.
Now, do you know who Andre DeGrasse is?
Yes. Yeah, big fan.
And what is he, just so that everyone who doesn't know?
Sprinter, yes.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of questions coming your way. So we are sprinting on these next few, okay? Okay. That's my setup on you. Here's one from Kathleen. What is the best job title to seek out as an independent advisor a person could check in with annually to be sure that they're on track?
Yep. There's the only time I'm going to be biased, folks, the entire time, and that is I do recommend finding an advice-only certified financial planner like myself, who doesn't sell anything. There's no potential conflict of interest on the advice that they're giving you. That's my recommendation. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough then. From Larissa, what if you have to go back to work after a few years? Should you just wait and keep contributing, or draw down on your savings and then contribute again?
So if you stop work, like there's no problem with, nothing wrong with taking money out of the RIF. You can take money out of an RSP as well, but there's sometimes what's called deregistration fees. So you might pay a fee to take that money out, whereas with RIFs, there's no fees. There might be tax withheld, but there's no fees. So it's a longer conversation, Larissa. And the answer is, as with everything in personal finance, it depends.
Okay, there's your sprint answer. But
thank you.
Maybe the piece was, if you convert an RSP to a RIF and you go back to work, you can't convert the RIF back to an RSP.
That's correct, but you don't have to. I'll end with this point, Scott. You don't have to convert your entire RSP to a RIF. You could do a partial conversion. You could say, okay, well, why don't I convert and put enough for the next few years into that I can draw out.
Okay. Lloyd, was Lloyd the one who's
Lloyd's a smart
Lloyd,
one. Yeah.
Okay, Lloyd, boom, that's fantastic. 4% on a RIF at 65. Thank you, Lloyd, very much for that.
Seriously. Okay, cool. Okay. Scott, I really want to hear from you. So, I want to pass it over to you.
And tell you what, if you've got, just because there's 3 questions that I want to, and I'm okay, I will scale what I do because I love that people are engaging here. Full stop, stay. Okay, that was a comment from Mary. Thank you, Mary, for that. And actually, you know what? How about planning work optional years when there is an age spread between spouses, say 5 years, one retiring, but you are the younger one? Do you go earlier?
Yeah, that's a bit of an individual question, but there might be some tax planning opportunities there where you can get some of your money out of your taxable accounts at a lower rate. And time is another one in there. And Scott, this is your specialty, is does the still working person have time to enjoy those activities? Can you create a life that works for both of you?
Yeah, fair enough. And my quick comment on that, just before we slide over, would be, you can leave work, you can go into work optional life, and you can re-engage with work, like if you wish to, or you need to, later on. There's a lot of folks increasingly in their 50s who are taking that sabbatical year, that year after university, to go, explore what they're doing in their 50s. So that's what we're going to be talking about, is that our retirement is not what our parents and grandparents' retirement was. So let me switch over here. And
all yours, Scott. Take it away.
Thanks. And just, in the chat box too, just a big round of applause for Steve there. I don't know, just having that knowledge and so much information, coming around is really appreciated. And if you haven't heard already, because you joined us a little bit late, any of the resources that are being offered by Steve and myself. And Steve has some websites. He has a budgeting spreadsheet, and the ones that I'm going to offer you are just going to come to you, I believe, later today in an email. So, don't worry about it if you've missed copying down a URL. So that was the finance piece. And if we were talking even as little as 10 years ago, that would be all that we talked about in terms of retirement. Excuse me. Because we have mostly been brought up that retirement is about taking care of the finances. And, you take a look at the title slide that you see on my screen right now, Retire and Aspire. My goal, 22 minutes when we finish here today, is to have you give a serious poke at your mindset about retirement. Because if we took a look at, say, our parents' retirement, our grandparents' retirement, particularly when lifespans were 70 or 75, retiring at 65, you've got 5-10 years there to, enjoy yourself. Well, today, if the average 5-year-old has a 50% chance of living to 100 years, we're somewhere in between. We're in the tidal zone. And if you're in that range from 45 to 70, something like that, you can be having 2, 3, 4 years of decades of really compelling life. So I want to challenge you to create a life that's compelling, not by my standards, not by Steve's standards or anyone else's standards, but your own. Because the truth is that most of us go into retirement, or as I like to call it, work optional life, on cruise control. And that is the worst thing we can do. So let's see how we can go about switching that out. In case we haven't met before, I'm Scott. I'm from Mind Switch. I've been playing. I love it. So I call my work play. I don't mean any disrespect by that. It's what my focus is, but I play in a transition workspace. I've created academies for professional sports leagues, helping players and families transition to life after life on the field. I've also gone, excuse me, I'm losing my voice 1 second. I also have toured Canada several times, visiting military bases and helping men and women of service that once they finish their lives, how to recreate a new identity for themselves once they leave. That's sort of why I play in this space. I'm also 60, so what Steve and I are talking about, I'm actually living. But the real reason, one of the real reasons I love to do this is I was bitten. I got the bug. And this mountain lion's name is not Bug. This is Amber. I was able to create what became Canada's largest endangered animal sanctuary and rehabilitation center simply because I pursued a passion. And Steve and I had a great conversation, didn't we, Steve, last week? We were talking about purpose and passion and retirement. And we were talking about, is it okay to have a purpose? And my short answer to that is, you leave your work, and we'll talk about what happens to your identity after that. But I want to stretch you to go beyond purpose. Purpose can be often utilitarian, and the way we think about it is where passion is something that you feel compelled to do. And when we retire, again, my goal for you in this 20 minutes is to really poke at your mindset and reach for passion. You may not get that full Mount Everest summit that you're thinking about. But if you only go for utilitarian, that's about as far as you're going to go. And when you go for passion, your mind, your body, all of that has to show up, which from a financial perspective, if we think of Steve's smile later on, increases our health span, which can reduce medical costs later on in life. So that's where I'm coming from. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal this past weekend, and it talked about the 60-year career. 60 years. And instead of the 40-year career. And that's what a lot of young folks are facing now. But if you think of when your parents or your grandparents retired, and do you remember that, to sort of get that in your mind?
Scott,
Yeah.
Did you say a 60-year career?
60-year
what do you mean?
60-year career, simply because with life expectancy approaching 100 over the next 5 or 6 decades, those who are 20 and 30, can you imagine the funding required? When you're 55 to live another 45 years of, full-on living, that's a long time. So, in terms of retirement, this is it's the artificial intelligence time for retirement. It's just hitting the marketplace in terms of how we can live and what we should expect from ourselves when we go to work optional living. So yeah, the Wall Street Journal, and it's been around for 1 or 2 years, this topic, but increasingly a lot of us who are 60, 65 stay to work because we have to and stay at work because we can. We have more health span. The question is, what do we want to do with that health span? And if we're thinking of our parents and our grandparents, there they are handing in the keys at the office place and driving down. And if it's golf, it's travel, it's whatever they want. It's just time for life to get relaxed, time for life to get small, time for life to get contracted. And that approach gets you dancing with demons, because most retirements happen something like this. And I took a picture of Steve on the beach in Mexico last week. You didn't see it there, Steve. Sorry about that. I should have let you know that. But when we do retire, it's sort of like a thoroughbred wanting to get out of a stall and run around and do whatever it wants. And nothing's going to deny a lot of people that feeling, just to have that freedom, because we've had decades of responsibility to family, career, friends, and we need that time to let loose. And we do let loose, and we do all those fun things. But usually somewhere, in my experience, somewhere between 3 months and 12 months after an individual's retired, they sort of go, yeah, now what? Because if you've ever gone to an all-you-can-eat buffet and you just, it's just a great thing, but you love chocolate cake and they force you to eat nothing but chocolate cake, after a while, chocolate cake gets a little bit boring. And one of the gals I play volleyball with, she retired from the Canadian Border Services a couple of years ago and loved her career. Couldn't wait for it. Couldn't wait to do the Hawaii thing and all the travel. And then 9 months into it, she says, "Scott, I'm languishing." And after I looked up what the word languishing meant, I found out it's just sort of going into abyss, a little bit of a drift, that there has to be something more. And for a lot of us, whether we loved our career and we closely identified with it, and I know a lot of you on the call and you strongly identify with your careers, or whether it was just a paycheck for you, that you just showed up. When we do leave our careers, there's a lot of things that go with it. And we lose things like social connections. We lose daily structure. We lose identity. Our egos take a hit. These are the things that are not talked about as much as TFSAs, RRSPs. And I will make the argument that they're at least, if not more, important than the financial matters.
I'll
See,
say
the financial
more.
matters. Sorry?
I'll say more, Scott. I'll say
Okay, because I thought we were going to have to arm wrestle on it, and I know you would beat me on that.
I've never won an arm wrestle in my life, Scott.
Okay, I may have a chance.
But I'm with you 100%. This is more important, I think, than the money stuff. Because if you've got the money, but you're not happy and without purpose or identity, this is gold. Yeah.
This is, you provide Steve, the gas in the tank of the engine, right? That's what you do. We can convert finances to all kinds of experiences and things to enable a quality life. But if you haven't got the mindset, which I view as the key to the engine to turn on to get the gas being used, then, how many people do you know who have all the finances taken care of in retirement, but it's just sort of, and it's interesting, Steve, the studies out of the UK will show that unless you have a compelling purpose in life, a lot of retirees, as little as 2 years after retirement, there's noticeable declines in physical and mental vitality, that you can see them getting weaker. You can see their mind getting slower. We may not want to be as challenged as much as we were when life was full octane, when work was full octane, but turning off the taps, that's not the way to go. The way to go is to find that passion. And again, when you've had those kind of careers and busyness, I would argue for a lot of us, the last time you really just thought about yourself may have been years ago. You may be caring for parents. You may be having family and kids that you've taken care of, or career. But when has the time been for you? And this is where we want to reset our personal compass so that we don't think of the company or others just as much as we used to, that we focus on what we would be passionate about. And again, stretch for passion. Stretch for passion like this guy, Hiromu Inada. Look at the smile on his face. That's an 86-year-old face finishing the Ironman triathlon in Kona, Hawaii. 2.2 miles of open ocean swimming, 112 miles of bike riding across lava fields, and then we have a full marathon being run. That was his passion. Okay, the oldest guy to ever do that. Now, the cool follow-up to this is, if this were the only person of this age doing it, then he becomes an outlier, an exception, an anomaly, like the gal in France who lived to be 122 years of age. But there are a lot of peoples in their 70s and early 80s who are doing this. But what happens if your passion is not the physical? What if it's something like this young lady did? Sort of just in the chat box here, Steve, I just want to take a peek here. Does anybody know who this is? Let me know if anybody is getting it. We'll send them a prize.
Not a guarantee.
Yeah, okay, nothing coming through. This is Laura.
No, not a guarantee that there'll be a prize.
This is Laura Ingalls Wilder, and she penned a series of books called Little House on the Prairie. She didn't start doing that till she was 65. And this guy here, Sir David Attenborough, who's been the voice of the natural world for decades, and then still is so in his 90s. Now, again, I haven't just picked three random extremes on this one. I mean, last week there was a gal out of Edmonton, Alberta, skiing on her 98th birthday. There was a Belarusian Canadian woman who summited K2 at the age of 63. She found her passion at the age of 50. She had never done mountain climbing before. And there's a gentleman last week, I think, for those of us who are on Vancouver Island, who got in a canoe and did a solo canoe across Canada last year at age 65. Your job is to find that passion and dig into yourself. I know mirrors are not my favorite thing at the moment. I try to, I take off my glasses because then it just looks a little bit better. But what we want to see is not the physical piece that's coming back at us. We want to look back into that time when you were relentlessly curious as a kid. And please don't think of these as just soft skills, the ones that, we do when we have time. This is the stuff that converts that money that Steve's helped you save into worthwhile experiences for your life. We've got to tap into that inner child again and get curious about things and find passions. And a lot of the times, Steve, when I talk to people, they go, well, that's great for you to talk about. Some people know what their passions are and a lot don't. So here's my advice for you. If you don't know what passion is that's waiting for you, I like to create what I call an interest radar. And the interest radar is simply that when I work with people, I say for 2 or 3 weeks, on your phone, you've got a memo pad. You can have OneNote or a voice memo, something like that. And you just record things that are of interest to you. Okay, you don't have to think about them. Don't dismiss them. Don't judge them while you put them in. And then after 2 to 3 weeks, you've got a laundry list of things that could be of potential interest. One of my clients, Greg was in the IT business for 35 years with a financial institution, retired flat, and did the shake and bake holiday, the wine tours, all that kind of stuff, realized there should be more in life, but was at a loss to find out what it was. He did this interest radar piece, and on his interest radar he was interested in music. He remembered that he was a manager of a pub in his university days and got to book the local bands. And the more he thought about it, because he hadn't thought about it for almost 40 years, he said, this is something I'd really like to explore. And how that converted into his work optional life was we put him in touch with the local music festival in his town where he did some volunteer work. And he's now in year 4 of working with them as one of the event organizers. So that's how he was able to find his passion. You can try that interest radar.
Hey, Scott, just on that, when I first heard about this from you, I thought it was really interesting. But are there any other resources that have, say, like a list of things that I could check off or review on my own time when I'm not out? Because I love this idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I have, I've got a guidebook over my shoulder. There is no selling going on here, folks. We're not going to compromise that, but there's a 1-page there that actually, does that kind of thought-provoking thing. The idea is with a passion is you can look at a list. The best thing to start with, Steve, is honestly to look inside yourself so that you begin to increasingly rely on this generating what you're interested in. Because if it's a list, it's skewed by somebody else. And then again, once again, you might be living somebody else's passion rather than your own.
Yeah, good point.
It's a journey for sure, but the list is a good place to start. So here's the mind switch model for dealing with work optional life. Now, Steve's covered in spades just beautifully the finance piece, but there's 5 other elements that are on the screen that we want to take a peek at. We're going to cover 1 or 2 today in detail, but the other ones that we're not going to cover, but I think are really important. One is vitality. And vitality is both from a physical perspective. If you've never read anything by David Goggins, his studies will show that humans tend to only use about 40-50% of our physical capacity. And Mother Nature plays a cool trick on us, because once our biological reproduction imperative has been satisfied, she turns down a whole bunch of chemicals within us that sort of gets our bodies to slow down. But here's the fun part. Our bodies can still do an awful lot. We just have to have the mindset to keep, working on that. So vitality becomes an important one. Mental vitality. The take-home piece for you here is that once you reach 60 or 65, do you know what you get from most Canadian universities and colleges? Yeah, free tuition. There's a lot of programs, courses, and even degrees that you can take with virtually no cost, and you can go back to school and take things that are actually interesting for you. Another one we're going to talk about that I love doing with folks is living legacy. And it's funny, this is a confusing term for a lot of folks. So at some point we may come up with a better word for it, but think of living legacy as this. If I asked you to choose 5 words that you would select to describe how you want to live your retirement, to be seen living your retirement, what would they be? So that's a take-home thing after today. What would those 5 words be that actually want to see? Now, I have mine over here. Let's see, positive, courageous, self-aware, authentic. I fall down flat on my face every day on those kinds of things, but they become my North Star as to the things that I want to do in my work optional life. So that's your living legacy. And the reason you care about that is because there's still an awful lot of eyes on you, partners, family, kids, grandkids, seeing how life should be lived, even your community, when you see, when you're being seen in your community. So living legacy is sort of one of those things that's sort of at the top of the mountain. How does the rest of all of this stuff underneath it shake out when you've got your living legacy identified? And the other piece that we're going to talk a little bit about here is social isolation. When you retire, your network at work tends to dwindle. There's lots of promises of lunches and get-togethers and things like that. But after a few weeks, it's usually becomes clear, a few months, that, work isn't the same interest to you. You're not up to speed on things, and they get fewer apart. And actually, Steve, over 1/3 of all Canadians over 65 report social isolation as being one of the biggest challenges they have to deal with.
I like that, Scott, because I think about when I work with my clients, I just mention it briefly, not the way you talk about it, but when our job goes away, social connections, purpose, identity, all these things you're talking about, so many of them are tied to work, and now we lose those. Plus, we have more time. So I love all of it. It's fantastic.
And the cool thing about this one, so Steve, is the takeaway is to always be on the lookout for another good friend. I think that's the piece. Is just a lot of people get set in their groups. I have friends on here who I've been friends with for over 50 years. And I've had folks here who I've only known for 2 or 3 months. And Steve, you and I are like that. Steve and I actually met when we went to a CAPS, which is a professional speaking association. We met at the registration desk, and I was giving him a hard time registering, and he smiled back. And here we are 4 months later doing a workshop. So always be on the lookout for another good friend. Here's my question of the audience here. Take out finance. Steve's covered that. Of the 5 remaining ones, adventure, purpose, vitality, living legacy, or social connection, which one do you think would be the largest challenge for you when you go to retire, work option life? In the chat box, if you could put down 1 or 2 of these that might actually be the biggest challenge for you in retirement.
All right, Scott, we've got social, a purpose and vitality, purpose, yeah.
Purpose.
Social's got a couple, 3 votes.
Yeah.
Purpose has a few votes.
Is there anything for living legacy?
Not usually. Yes, 1 living legacy. Okay. Living. Yep. Okay. Yep.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Purpose, legacy. Good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you all for lighting up the chat box there on this one. The reason I ask you that is your work optional life is yours. It's got to be as unique as you, and each one of us is going to have different things to come across. What I can say based on those responses, I don't usually get so many people actually saying that social connection is going to be that. So that just means that there's an extra degree of honesty on this call here. So thank you for that. This is one of the resources that we're going to send to you. You can see there's a QR code on the screen. You can certainly scan that now, but this will be part of the package that Steve and I send to you. And what this is just a good place to start. It's a good roadmap to get a balanced approach to what your retirement should be. And the cool thing is you don't have to fill this out all at once. If you all of a sudden just say, you know, I really want to work on my purpose, then you work on this one. But this is sort of a good base to come back to. So feel free to use this, pass this around, because it sort of helps focus all those thoughts. Now, Steve, do I have a time to go through one or two ones in a little bit more detail?
Absolutely, Scott. We got 8 minutes remaining, and it's all yours.
Okay. So what we're going to do is just talk about passion and purpose. We've done, this is the biggest one, generally speaking. Okay. This one, without this in place, work optional life becomes a little bit more challenging. And it's because when we leave our work, our self-confidence, our ego take a hit. We've talked about our social connections can actually dwindle. And daily structure, believe it or not, I know how many of you are enjoying not having to commute. I hope a lot of you don't have to commute like you used to. But we need a bit of daily structure. And I just want to tell you a quick story about Carl, because Carl is noteworthy. Carl is a business owner, East Coast, plays in the medical devices space. When he was 55, he wanted to retire and travel the world with his wife and play tennis, golf, do all that fun, honeymoon suite kind of activity stuff. He brought on some professional managers, trained them. So he disappeared for a year, and the new management team, which I was working with, took over, and we're doing quite a good job. About month 15, Carl started showing up, and he started showing up in the accounts receivable department, where he shipping and receiving department, where he was telling people how to package items and how to ship items. And then he slipped over to marketing and talked about, Mary, about how to brand things and all that kind of stuff. And I got a call from the new general manager. She said, Carl is costing us money. These people don't know who he is. We don't do those things anymore. So my question for you is Carl trying to cause problems? Well, actually, if you knew Carl, yeah, he was. He's a pot stirrer. But Carl had nothing to go to. He had no future identity or purpose actually planned out. And that's the part we all want to avoid. So if you are not yet retired, it's a great chance to use that interest radar to figure out what that might be for yourself once you do hit that pause button. A good purpose for you, be naturally attracted to it. I love writing. You can ask me to write an article about anything. I just love writing. It's a natural attraction. My English teacher would be very surprised by that, but that's something I love to do. A good purpose requires you to have to learn or know something. Okay, so if it's just doing the same girl at Van City who's managed my account for 10 years, retired 3 years ago, couldn't wait for it. I saw her back in the queue last fall. I said, what are you doing back here? She said, well, I had to do something in my afternoons. Okay, that's the part. That's why I do what I do. I hate hearing those kinds of answers. We want to learn something. We want it scalable to match our life. So we don't want to trade one 40-hour per week career for another. So part-time contract, something that suits you. And the last piece about this one is most of us don't dream anywhere big enough. Okay, find that huge purpose on that interest radar. And the last one, just before we wrap up here, Steve, is I want to talk about real adventures, and not so much because I'm an adrenaline junkie, although I will confess that real adventures pay an ROI that investments would have a real tough time to match. A real adventure, I want you to think for yourself right now in the sense, when's the last real adventure you had? Just 5 seconds, think about the last real adventure that you had. It's something that has to get you excited. You learn something new. Okay, so that wine tour, that cruise, maybe doesn't qualify. It pushes you outside your comfort zones. So you're doing something that you haven't done before. You're expanding your skills and your knowledge. And here's the cool one. In real adventures, the outcome's not guaranteed. And here's what I mean. Last June, the three amigos went to do a sectional hike of the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a trail from Mexico to Canada. And it was in Oregon, and we planned this trip for a long time. By the way, the Paul on the right-hand side there, 68 years of age, met him when he was 58 and retiring as a motorcycle mechanic, came out for a hike, lasted 2 minutes, and he was done. Now he was doing a 100-mile hike with us on the Oregon Tar, the Pacific Crest Trail. So we were on this hike. We went to start it out, went to our trailhead or tried to, but we were greeted with a gate that said, trespassers will be shot. And a cattle rancher had bought up the land and closed that trailhead. So all of a sudden, our months of planning thrown out the window. So we had to pivot. We found a new trailhead, went up to around 4,000, 5,000 feet. I don't know if you can see in the back of the picture here. We started seeing this white stuff. This is the end of June. It's 80 degrees outside, and there was still 5 feet of snow. It was incredibly exhilarating. It certainly helped increase our problem-solving capabilities because every day we found out we could not go where we wanted to. But what it really showed us was that, did you know that you can pan fry hash browns using peanut butter as an oil to do that? Just so you know, there's the learning piece for today. Certainly improved self-confidence and putting all these things together. We didn't see anybody for 3 or 4 days. We're in the middle of nowhere. What a wonderful feeling to be that self-reliant. And the cool thing with real adventures is you get with like-minded people who want to try new things and grow, and it just increases the social connections. Now, just in case physical adventure is not your thing, you can have a real adventure another way. And I'm just going to close out with this one. 4 years ago, this gentleman, and this was in the newspaper last December, enrolled at the University of Western Ontario for a degree program, has advanced Alzheimer's. And if you read into the story, students were talking about how they would see him wandering around the campus, they're not knowing which way to go. He was not going to let his learning difference define himself. He was not going to restrict his life because of a perceived disability. This past fall, at age 84, he convocated with his degree. Your real adventures can be physical, they can be intellectual, they can be spiritual, but they have to get you excited. You have to learn something, get you outside of your comfort zone, and the outcome is not guaranteed. Okay. All right. So that's what I have for us today, Steve. Thank you so much for that. And I'll let you be time master. We want to have some time for questions and our wrap-up slide. So, sir, why don't you let me know what you prefer?
Yeah, this is just excellent. And my hands are actually sweaty from the Carl story and the Van City Teller story, because I don't want to, I don't want to be that. So this stuff is absolute gold. And this last story is very inspirational. Should we, why don't I just do a quick wrap up? We are going to stick around for anybody who wants to, and we can have a chat and answer questions or whatever you like. But I'll just do a quick wrap up, Scott, if that's okay.
Yeah. So what Steve's going to do, we're going to wrap up for about 30 seconds, and we haven't had a chance to ask questions about this. And we know it's the top of the hour. We're going to stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes and answer any questions that you might have.
Really love doing these presentations to companies, to organizations. What we did today is just really the tip of the iceberg, and there's very few people delivering, I think, this 1-2 punch of the financial and non-financial and not actually selling anything. So if you do know of any companies or organizations that might benefit from this, please keep us in mind or introduce us. As I said, what we talked about, tip of the iceberg, we do half day, full day, 2-day presentations on this stuff. We also present individually on our own topics and work with individuals one-on-one basis. Our emails are there on the screen. So if you want to reach out to us with follow-up questions or feedback or anything, we're open to hear, and we will be contacting you. We will email you later with the resources that we talked about.